How's it going, everybody? So I have came up with a good idea to go over each one of my quotes in my own personal video explaining the wisdom and knowledge behind it. It was about 3 to 4 years ago that I started having an ability to write holographic poetry or quotes, and it kind of just stampeded my ability to where I was always able to keep thinking of another quote, another quote, another quote, and I basically started becoming like a master with coming up with quotes that were, knowledgeable and, almost reveal the secret of the universe. And it's a part of how I also became as smart as I have become. And after I started writing so many quotes, I got to a point where I would be able to write a quote and then explain the quote. So I would almost be able to write two quotes at the same time. Whereas to when I first started writing my quotes, I kind of only just wrote the quote, and I'm going to explain the process of what I go through when I write my quotes. So when I first start writing my quotes, I start having a mental image of a concept or idea that I understand in my mind. And from there, I slowly construct and build the structure of the statement to where every single part of the statement makes sense and reveals the holographic nature and principle of what the quote reveals. And the reason a lot of my quotes are so good is because there was a time about 6 to 8 years ago where I started scripting, basically like a mathematical script, and it was, after a week of doing it that I actually started beginning becoming and getting really good at scripting the procedure and the process. And then, after a month of doing it, then I just really got really good with it. And then I was able to understand the structure of how things were. And a lot of the scripts that I would write were things like if, and, or, greater than, or less than, and then it would initiate commands. So after doing it for 2 months, I got to a point where I was basically finished scripting because I really didn't need to do it anymore. But it was always like burned into my mind, and it was also like a new way of thinking for me of my procedure. So before I started scripting in this particular way, I had always, kind of done scripting and coding, basics, nothing too extravagant. I never really got too interested in it until I began like this specific type of scripting, which is where I had like all sorts of breakthroughs of having all sorts of out of the box, ordinary procedure of scripting. So it took a lot of practice, and then I found myself about a year to 3 years later coming up with all these holographic quotes to where I could kind of add in my experience of how I could script into my quotes. So a lot of these scripts, you'll notice, kind of have an algorithm of, like scripty-ish, and that's why they always make so sense, because my scripts would always repeat infinitely on a loop, to where it would always just always be under control of everything that's being processed through it. So when I started learning how to come up with these quotes, my quotes started being able to loop infinitely, to where it would always line up and make sense for that certain aspect or dynamic of which I would reveal. So my final words on what I'm going to reveal on this is, what was I going to say? I forgot. It wasn't too important. It was just kind of going over the final conclusion of my quotes. But yeah, my quotes, they're really, my own, like 90%, 95% of it is what I came up with. And I would always just go find an appropriate background that kind of matched the feeling and the vibe to the quote. So, and these quotes helps me always make the most accurate choices and conclusions, and understand everything so much more in depth. Oh yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So quotes explain everything the most, is what I realized in one of my quotes later on that I'll explain. So I had really quickly begun to notice that, what you can be quoted on what you say and what your statement is like basically the most important part of your argument or potentially theory. And that's why these quotes are absolutely can be enlightening for anyone who goes over these quotes that I'm gonna reveal. And I eventually am going to laminate and print my quotes and sell them. But I've come up with around 120 plus quotes already, and I still, like every other day or at least every other week, I come up with another quote. And some of my quotes, I kind of will see a quote and then I'll just reword it to where it's a little more fine-tuned and defined with my knowledge of my algorithm of scripting. Because it's like, their quote is not that it's wrong, it's just that if they just added a little bit more of a more defined detail, it would just be so much more powerful. So a few quotes I've done that with, not very many. Probably less than 20, maybe even less than 10 quotes I've done that. But those are the quotes that really inspire me that I've seen, and it's like, oh, that quote is really good. Let me add in a little bit more detail to where it makes more sense. So all these quotes were completely out of my own mind, out of my own sitting, taking that 5 minutes to put what I had visualized into a statement or quote. So that's one of the most important things that I've realized is, everyone needs to be able to say things that they can be quoted on. And that's a lot of the problem with all these arguments going on in the world and all these riots going on in the world is, they aren't saying anything that they can be quoted on, which doesn't teach anybody anything or doesn't give anybody to hold on to something. So with that said, that's my introduction to my quotes that I'm going to make a video for. And I hope everybody enjoys. And my name is Brian Tabar. And I put my signature on each of my quotes. I realized that, man, I have a talent and ability of writing amazing quotes. In fact, my quotes always teach me the most of what I need to know, and that's why I started like writing them down is because it's like, if more people had quotes that you could quote off of, I would be able to self-develop so much faster and learn so much more. So I felt, maybe it's just my turn to contribute to society with something not everyone is going to have the same level of ability up for. So I wanted to get my face on camera in this introduction, because in my videos that I go over my quotes, I'm just going to use subliminal visionaries with my quote and then explain it. So a lot of my videos, when I go over a quote, they aren't going to be very long. I may just go over my quote for a minute or two, and then that'll be the video. So it'll be really high quality, but I'm going to try to make sure that each of these quotes links to some sort of self-development keyword that people are searching for. So with that said, I hope everybody enjoys, and I hope that everybody pays very close attention to the concepts and wisdom that I will be revealing here for everybody. So there it is, my introduction to my quotes. I'll see you in my future videos. So right now I have over about 120 quotes that I'll be going over. By the time I even get those 120 quotes uploaded into a video, I'll probably have more. So it'll probably be more than 120, because I tend to come up with quotes like at least a few times a week, and sometimes in a day I can come up with 5 or 10 quotes. So it just depends, because I just have moments of eureka where I can just understand and connect the dots.